Hey, Mike Gambrill with BlackHawk Paramotors with my sidekick Austin Powers. So today what we're going to do is take you through assembling your new LowBoy III quad package. When you get your package, it's going to come like this. So expect a few boxes, and from that point on, we may as well get started. So let's get this opened up, Austin. Okay, so we've got basically the mainframe unpackaged here at the moment, so we're just going to take this a step at a time. This right here is your mainframe. That's the rear end, front steering, axles, wheels and tires on each side, struts, your locator arms for your CG, and the seat rails. So when you unpackage this, it's a good idea just to lay it out like that. Every bolt and nut that goes into here is already pre-installed. So you're not going to have any missing parts, and the bolts go right back where they came from. So it kind of makes it a lot easier for you assembling these. We're going to start by installing the rear end into the mainframe. So to do that, we'll go ahead and remove the quick release pins. Now, this whole thing can be put together with the quick release pins. There's also a bag that comes with bolts and nuts to replace these if it's your decision whether you want to use quick release pins or whether you'd rather use bolts and nuts going through there. If you don't have any intention of taking this thing apart, which most people don't, I would highly recommend replacing these with the nuts and bolts. Everything is installed going down and out like this. The bolt goes in this way with the nut on the bottom. So pretty easy to remember. Ready, Austin?
Yep.
All right, let's get going. Okay, so it's easy basically to stand the mainframe up. This is the back. So now we're just going to slide the rear end. Tube within a tube. So we'll go ahead and this might require a little bit of jiggling, and the use of a soft rubber mallet sometimes helps just to get them seated all the way down. So what we were talking about, the quick release pins, simply go from the inside, and notice that this is an angle going downward. Start from the inside, go ahead and install the pin, and then just roll that over the top. And you do repeat the same for the other side. Okay, so we've completed installing the back. Now we're going to go ahead and install the front into the mainframe. Once more, remove your quick release pins, set those off to the side. Okay, so before we slide the front portion into the mainframe, we're going to want to get out our load straps. You're going to notice that there is a small sewn in and a large sewn in. This large one needs to slip over the front portion of the frame before we slide this in. So just work it over the weld so it sits like this, it's out of the way. You need to do that on both sides. And we will slide the front end, and once more from the inside going down, slide the pin in, and just go ahead and close this. Now once more, if you're using the bolts, goes in the same way with the nut on the bottom. Okay, so that completes the front end portion. Now we're going to install the steering head for the front end. This one's also very simple. Front steering comes with a couple of collars. These collars are to adjust for your height. So instead of moving the seat back and forth, we can simply move the steering head back and forth. So the two collars, you only use one or the other. So if you're a really tall guy, you'll put the long collar on and it'll pin through here. If you're a shorter individual, just use the only one collar. That brings you into the second adjustment. And if you're shorter like myself, then you go ahead and just use the first one and you don't need to use these. So we're just, for assembly purposes, we're going to leave those out. This just simply slides in the front. Once more, your quick release pin just goes through, snap it shut, and that completes the front steering assembly installed. So while we're here, we may as well put on the front axles. I'm going to point out something on the front axles. You'll notice here in the front, or on the end of the axle, they'll be labeled right front, left front. When we're talking about left front and right front, that's you standing behind the machine, looking forward the direction of flight. So that'd be your left, and that'll be your right. So anyways, that's a pretty simple thing to remember. Once more, everything is already positioned where it should be. So we'll go ahead and slide the front axles in. I'll have to move my other sidekick out of the way. She's snoring. Come here, big sexy. Hey. Yeah. Okay, perfect. So let's slide the front axles in. Want you to notice that the angle here should go down and then come straight out. This obviously is not going to work. So this is the correct position. You go ahead and line up the holes and you can slide your quick release pin. This will go in from the front. So this goes in from the front with the clip going over the top. You'll repeat the same thing on the other side. So the axles are installed. Next, we may as well put on the front tires. So again, another quick release pin. Pull this out, and I'm going to warn you, these are like a mouse trap, and that hurt. So careful, they're spring loaded. Install the wheel and tire with your inflation valve going outboard. And this is a real simple thing, just they slide on. Install your quick release pin. So your quick release pin goes through the spindle. As again, I'll mention it's a mouse trap. So just install that. It'll slide down and then just let that go. Do the same on the other side, and this procedure is going to be exactly the same for the rear axles installation and the wheel and tire assembly. When we got all the front portion installed, next thing we'll need to do is just go ahead and tighten up the steering head. So there's a 17mm end wrench. Most people don't own two, so we can, this one happens to have a ratcheting in, which is kind of nice. And then we'll go ahead and hold, and it's the same size nut on the bottom, 17mm. And I'm just going to use an adjustable wrench. And then we just go ahead and tighten this up. Once more, with any of these things, we do not have to He-Man crank them so tight that we're ready to break the bolt. All you have to do is snug them up. So we'll go ahead and, there we go. And we can pick up and move the front. It's nice, comes up against the stops good. That completes the whole front end installation. Okay, so now we're going to go ahead and install the rear axles. This is the same deal. Rear axles are going to be labeled right rear, left rear. Hardware is already installed. So we can go ahead and just remove the hardware. Gets installed like this. This one's not going to work real well. So just like that. And we'll go ahead and pick up the back end and slide it in, line up the holes. Okay, and we'll move on to the wheels and tires for the rear once more. Valve stem goes to the outside. These simply just slide on the spindle. We take our mouse trap and it gets installed the same way as the front did. That completes the wheels and tires and axles installation, and now what we're going to do is we're going to move on to installing the rear struts. These will be labeled. We'll zoom in on this a bit so you can see this, but you're going to notice that one end of the rod is adjustable, the other end of the rod is fixed. The fixed portion of the rod goes on the bottom, the adjustable portion goes to the top. Your bolts will be mounted from the outside going inside with the nut ending up on the inside. The purpose of this is to have a slip fit. We do not use these to preload the frame in any way. They're there just as a structural support. When you're installing this, you'll bring it up, go ahead and press it in until you get the hole to line up. The purpose of this adjustable rod end is if this doesn't look straight through, it's not a clear hole, then we'll need to move this up or down. So that's very easy to do. In this case, we need to go up. So I'm going to turn that half a turn, press that back in, and then check it again. And what we're looking for is just a nice slip fit. Now I'll remind you that the plastic bushings in these rod ends are pretty close tolerance, so you may end up having to tap it, but this is what we're looking for, is that this will go through freely on its own. Sometimes we might have to just help it along through, but the idea is that we're not preloading anything. Okay, the tools that you're going to need: a 13mm end wrench and a 6mm Allen head wrench. There's no set torque on this, just snug it up. You do not have to crank these up super tight. It's a self-locking nut, a nylock nut, and these are in shear. So the strength is actually being able to break the bolt in half rather than pulling against the threads. So we just snug these up. That's good. And we'll repeat this on the other side. Yeah. Okay, so we've already tightened up the nuts and bolts for the struts. Now, on the adjustable end, we want to go ahead and tighten up the jam nut. So most people aren't going to have a 17mm end wrench and a 17mm end wrench. So if you have an adjustable wrench, or if you're lucky enough to own two 17mm wrenches, all we have to do is the fixed portion, solid part of the rod, we want to hold on to that because we don't want to try and rotate it. Then we're going to go ahead and get on the nut, and all we're doing is tightening this. It's a jam nut. You do not once more have to super crank on this. Just snug it up tight, and that's all there is to it. Okay, I wanted to point out something about the aluminum fuel tank installation. With the plastic fuel tank, you won't have to worry about that, but if you purchased the option for the aluminum fuel tank comes with a sight tube. This is so you can just visually look while you're outside your machine, or use a mirror while you're flying the machine to see how much fuel you have left in the tank. When we do the strut installation, the sight glass tube has to go outside and around. So we purposely leave these clamps loose so that you can remove it, install the strut, bring the sight glass tube around, and then just simply slide it back over the fitting. Both of these clamps, you need to check and make sure that they're tight so that they don't leak, obviously. And so you just go ahead, tighten the clamps up, and that completes the installation as far as making sure that your sight glass tube is mounted in the right position. Okay, so now we're going to go ahead and do the fuel pump installation. It's easier done without the seat being installed because everything sits right here. You'll notice that this customer got the aluminum fuel tank. There's a 3.2 gallon fuel tank that comes with the package. This is an option. Both of these installations are the same. So how you see the fuel pump being mounted, where the hoses go, all that is going to be the same. It's just that this is going to be replaced with a plastic fuel tank that holds 3.2 gallons. So first what we're going to do is you're going to notice that there's a bracket that comes down right here with a bolt, a rubber hose, and then a nut and a washer on the back. So we'll go ahead and remove this, and this is exactly where the fuel pump is going to go. So you'll go ahead and remove the nut and washer. Let's remove the hose. Now we need to orient the fuel pump. So the easiest way to remember this is this side of the fuel pump is where your wiring plugs in to turn it on and off. So this is actually going to face aft to the back. This port is the outlet. This hose goes up to your throttle body. The bottom one here goes as the inlet from the fuel tank. The top one here is your return line to the fuel tank. It's the bypass. So make sure that the fuel pump is oriented exactly like this. You'll go ahead and take the bolt, put it through the mounting hole here. You'll take the rubber hose, slide that on. From here, we're going to go back to our bracket. That's just going to slide right in. And then you'll take your nut and washer and get that started. The tools you're going to need for this is a 5mm Allen and a 10mm end wrench. So we'll go ahead and get here. If you want to use a ratchet and a 10mm, it'll make this go a little quicker. I'm just trying to show you that with just real basic tools that you can assemble this. The idea is to tighten this to where that rubber hose is squinched up really nice and tight, and you'll notice that the electrical connector for the fuel pump will actually come right up near the bracket, and the fuel pump should be I'm at a bad angle and the fuel pump will come up to within about 1/8 of an inch of the bracket. So you're going to tighten this up actually quite a bit. That rubber hose acts like a shock absorber and helps keep the pump from moving. And that looks pretty good. Okay, so fuel pump's mounted in place. Next step is the fun part. So you're going to have 3 quick disconnects. They go to the inlet, return line, and your pressure line. So what we'll want to do is go ahead and snap these in place. Okay, so on this quick disconnect, there's 2 buttons right here on the side. These are to go ahead and remove it. You don't need to worry about that at the moment. What we want to do is just go ahead and line it up onto the nipple and snap it in place. The reason that we want to do this is because right now we're going to need to trim the fuel lines to length. We leave these a little bit long on purpose so that you can go ahead and fit these and have a nice custom fit for your machine. So you'll want to leave a little bit of slack, wiggle room, okay? And that hose is going to slide down onto the nipple a good 3/4 of an inch or so. So go ahead and line that up. You can use your fingers to hold it in place. This is nice. It's not going to contact the tank and it's free and clear. So we can hold these up, use a pair of scissors, and you can cut that fuel line off, take the excess and set it off to the side. So that's going to be our return line. Down on the bottom here is our inlet line. So once more, we want this to be a nice straight shot coming in. That looks really nice. Again, I just kind of marking it with my thumbnail and then cut it to length. Okay, so we've went ahead and trimmed our fuel lines to length. Now, if you have a heat gun, you can use a lighter if you want to. The object is just to make the hose a little bit more pliable. What my sidekick Austin is going to show you here, we're just going to use a heat gun, but we'll heat up the hose. You don't melt it, just warm it up to where it's really nice and flexible in your fingers. And then he's going to go ahead and use a little WD-40 on the nipple stuff, just as a little bit of lubrication. Then he's going to slide that on, and then you go ahead and connect it. So go ahead, Austin, and do a quick demo on this. And then we'll go ahead and repeat the same process for the return line. So that completes the installation of your inlet line and your return line. You do not need to use clamps on these. You'd end up having to cut these hoses off to get them off. And there's absolutely no pressure in these lines. Okay, so next is going to be your main fuel line. This is the line that takes 43 psi of pressure from the pump. So you will get this with the QD already installed, and then we have a special clamp on here. Make sure that that clamp is snugged up tight, okay? And then this side is the clamp that will go, but we're going to leave this free because we'll get into that later about bleeding the fuel system. But what you can do right now is just go ahead, snap this into the outlet side, and then we'll just lay the hose back here. This standoff that's on here, we'll attach that, we'll cover that later, but we'll do this after we get the motor installed on here. So that really completes your whole fuel system for the moment. Okay, next we're going to cover the installation of the seat. So once more, the hardware is already in position. So this is exactly where they're going to go back. And you're going to notice that this is a channel. So we have a short vertical part, and then we have the wider part down below. How this goes in is exactly like that. You'll notice that there's a hole in the frame here and a hole in the frame here. These are going to line up, and this will just simply set down in like that. So we'll go ahead and remove the hardware. All you have to do is just take the nut and washer off the bottom. And then go ahead and reinstall the nut and washer on the bottom. The tools that you'll need for this is a 13mm socket and ratchet and a 13mm end wrench. So we'll just go ahead and hold it from the top, and since these are U-shaped channels, it's hard to really get a wrench in there, and that's why it's just a lot easier if we use a socket. And we're just going to tighten these up all the way around. It's more just snug them up. There's no reason to try to break the bolt in half. There you go, Austin.
Yep.
So now that we have the seat rails installed, we'll go ahead and install the seat. We'll go ahead and remove those seat belts real quick. We'll dive into that part later. You're going to notice once more the seat comes with all the hardware in position. So once more, you're going to go ahead and need to remove the bolts, nuts, and washers, and then we're going to go ahead and set the seat onto the rails. When we install these, you're going to find that you may need to go ahead and loosen these nuts right here to give you enough clearance to get that bolt out. These right here are 14 millimeter. Okay, so we've got the hardware removed. Now what we're going to do is just go ahead and set the seat onto the rails.
Right up against the back, so that's good then, right? Yep.
Okay, so we set the seat in, and what we want to do is slide this seat back as far as possible to where it's just has maybe an 1/8 inch clearance between these rear seat rail mounting bolts and the seat mount rail itself. Like I said before, position as far back as possible. If you're extremely short, the reason that we don't drill and mount these and have it set up like that is sometimes we have somebody who's just a little bit shorter than what we have for the adjustment here. So this will allow you to actually move the seat forward a little bit so that you can get your feet comfortably onto the steering. Once you have this set in position, I find it easy to take a Sharpie, and what you'll want to do is mark the seat rail here, and then in the back position we'll do the same thing. So we're actually just drawing a line on the seat rail itself on the frame, and we're doing the same here. Then you'll see the holes. So just go ahead and mark a hole, and you can reach down here and mark a hole. And this will just give us a position where we want to be when we go to drill this. And Austin will go ahead and do the other side there. Okay, so once we have this marked, we'll know exactly where to set these seat rails back in place. We'll just go ahead and remove the seat now. And what we're going to need to do is just remove the seat cover. We're going to remove these nuts, and it's critical that you do this because it's easy to get this mixed up. If you write on the bottom, this side here is the left side forward, right side and forward. That way we know the orientation of the rail. We're going to go ahead and remove these rails, these nuts right here. You'll want to take the seat cover off because these are a carriage bolt. So they're self-capturing through the back or through the bottom of the seat here. So we'll go ahead and get those removed. And then we're going to take this seat rail and we're going to set it right back in position and line it up. So we'll go ahead and get those removed and we'll be right back with you. Okay, so we're going to demonstrate one side, and just remember that's going to be the same process for the other side. Remember, we marked these left side, front. So we can set this right back down, line it up with our marks, fore and aft. And the reason that I like to just put a little mark here where the holes were, the ones that I could actually access while the seat was on here, is just so that I can look at this and go, yeah, it's lined up good. Once we have this lined up, one of two ways you can do this. You can go ahead and take your Sharpie and go ahead and draw a circle, circle, and a circle. And then go ahead and remove this and then drill right in the center of the circle. Each one, you'd repeat the same on this side. What you'll need is an 8mm drill bit a drill. 8mm 5/16 works also, about equivalent. And we'll go ahead, I usually will just hold this in place, and you can use a pair of little vice grips on each side and clamp it in place. This is all your preference. But I like to hold it right here, get myself nice and centered, and then I can use the drill and mark it, and it starts. Some of you guys out there be going, well, you can use a center punch. Well, I've got a certain type of drill bit here that starts really nice. So we'll go ahead and we can go through, repeat this process going on down. Either remove this or have it clamped in place, it's your choice. Go ahead and drill these holes out. You'll do the same on the other side. Then we'll take our mounting hardware, put the bolts through, put the nuts and the washers through, and you can snug them up. Do not tighten them completely yet. Then what we'll do is we'll take the seat, and you notice that we have the carriage bolts still hanging down. Now you can set the seat right on top, line up the carriage bolts through here, and again, don't tighten these up. Give it a little bit of wiggle room. Makes it easier for you getting this all back on. Go ahead and set the seat down in place. Carriage bolts go through here. Once more, you'll take your washers, a lock washer and a nut, go up through the bottom, tighten those up, and then go ahead and finish tightening these up. We'll go ahead and just set the seat in place right now, just as a quick demonstration. This is an actual customer's unit, so we don't want to really do any drilling on this, but I wanted to cover this is how it's done. So we'll go ahead and just set the seat in place for now and get those lined up. So we'll go ahead and get those tightened. Now remember, you'll have already taken the bolts that were originally in here. You'll go ahead and just put those back, and you'll go ahead and snug those up in place. Don't tighten them completely until after you have all the studs going through on the other part and those. Then go ahead and tighten everything down. And then that completes the seat installation. And Austin's going to go ahead and get those tightened up. We'll be right back with you, and we'll move on to how to install the seat belts. Okay, so next we're going to go ahead and cover the seat belt installation. Easiest way to do this is just to get the seat belts out. They'll come in a white box. So you'll go ahead and get them out. This is the lap belt portion. So this is the male and the female end. So just lay it across the seat. And as you come up along the shoulder straps, you'll find that the BlackHawk label is right here. So we can just go ahead and we'll lay these over the top for the moment. Then we have the lap belt portion right here. In the seat, there's a slot for the seat belt to go through. So just go ahead and feed it. Coming through, and you'll notice that there is a mount portion right here that's welded onto the main frame. So just go ahead, slide that through. The buckle portion will go through all of this also and come out. And this is just a real easy way to bring it around. What we're going to want to do is have you actually sit in the seat. Well, I'll use my trusty sidekick Austin as our example. And you can just lay the seatbelt off to the side. So you want to go ahead and sit inside here. Fasten the seatbelt and then pull them down to where you're comfortable. If you're in a place where you're going to be wearing winter clothes, stuff like that, maybe allow yourself a little bit of space. Or if you're going to gain weight, for instance, leave yourself some extra. If you plan on losing weight, leave it nice and tight, and then you'll be able to gauge that weight loss. What we want to do is just get that buckle portion. How does that feel, Austin?
That's great.
That's great?
Yep.
Good. This will need to come back through, but I've got the buckle portion where I want it to be. Now I can feed this over the top. feed it back through and in. So that strap is around the bar. Okay, so what we're going to do now that we fed this back through and we know that this is where we want to be up against the mount portion down here, is feed that through, and now we can just pull in the excess. So we're not pulling anything from the buckle portion itself here. We're just going to pull in the excess and tighten that down. We leave ourselves a bit of room, go through the other side of the buckle and out. We can push this back through, but I find it nice if this is sitting just pretty much inside the seat. And if you work your fingers a little bit, you can pull that on through and end up with it securely attached. You'll repeat the same thing for the other side, and that'll complete the lap portion, and we'll go ahead and move into the shoulder strap portion. Okay, so in order to hook up the shoulder straps, we have two mounting points here for the shoulder straps. What we want to do is cross them. So we'll go from the left, and I'll just go ahead and take this right side out of the way. These are extremely long, but we'll go through the center of the seat. Feed that through. And I'll get that to Austin. Now we're going to go from the left, and this is going to mount exactly the same way as we did the lap belt portion of it. It goes the same way here is how we go ahead and secure it. At this point, since we've got the left side going over to the right, we can feed the right side shoulder strap through, going over to the left. So we want to make sure that our shoulder straps are meant for us. So now is another good time to relax. Have a seat. Go ahead and buckle up the seat belt. Put the shoulder straps over you, and you can feed these through. Keep coming through. And what you want to do is leave yourself some adjustment. Have about a foot of strap on each side here, so that gives us a lot of, if we're wearing a jacket or anything else, that we can go ahead and let this out. And if we're in our summer mode, like right now, we can go ahead and have them in. That way they're nice and secure. Once we have the length established, we can pull the excess through the back and then go ahead and we'll secure it the same way. Okay, so now that we got this adjusted at the right length for us, remember from the right coming across going to the left and vice versa. So we have that adjusted. We can bring this buckle down right to the mounting point for the shoulder straps. Take the excess, come through. We'll go around, back through the buckle, and back through the buckle, and there we have it. So that's how these get secured. Again, it gets secured on the mounting point here the same way for the lap belt. Now what we're going to end up with is leftovers. There's two ways you can go about this. What we suggest is to go ahead and cut this with a pair of scissors. Then you can take a lighter or something and then just singe the edges. The other option is you can do a series of S-loops like that. Put a tie wrap around here or a couple of tie wraps and secure it solidly. The disadvantage of doing that is if, per se, something happens to the tie wraps, this comes out and bingo can find its way into the prop. So most people, there's a lot of adjustment in these anyways, so you can you know, winter clothes, summer clothes, vice versa. There's plenty of adjustment up front on the shoulder harness itself. So we suggest you go ahead and trim these and go ahead and singe the edges. And that completes our installation of the seatbelt assembly. Now we're going to go ahead, we've completed the assembly of the LowBoy III pretty much, but now we need something to push it into the air, so we're going to move on to installing the engine. The Aero 1000 will come pretty much all assembled for you. To include the main frame, it's all pre-mounted for you. The only thing that you're going to have to do is hang it, and then we have 2 bolts, 2 spacers, washers and nuts. Now if you look right here, you'll see that this is slotted. So the bolt slides from the forward portion going back and will look something like this. The spacer goes over the bolt. This is to secure the bottom of the main frame to the LowBoy III. Now on the bottom of the main frame, there's some corresponding slots that this has to line up with. Now, in order for us to try to offset some of the effects of torque, we've had these slotted horizontally. The object is to hang this, bring it down to the bolts, but have this slid over to the right as far as we can, lining up with the slots. So the farther that we have it over to the right, the more this offsets. But how we have this slotted is so that if we had a 2-stroke engine on here where the prop was spinning counterclockwise or to the left, we can actually move it and shift it over to the left. And these slots are preset. So it's either going to be all the way to the right with the 4-stroke engine, or if we have the Black Bull on there, for example, it'd be moved all the way over to the far left. We went ahead and just put these in here so that you can see how this is going to line up, but we found it easier. We'll remove this. We'll go ahead and hang this, and then we'll have one person on one side looking, and we'll pull the back of the engine out, and then we try to walk it over to the right while keeping this square to the frame. Once we achieve it all the way over to the right as far as we can go, this is going to slide down on, and then we would go ahead and add our nut and washer. So you're going to need a 6mm Allen for the bolt, and for the nut a 13mm either end wrench. It's not easy to get a socket in there. You're going to end up using an end wrench, and you can either hold the Allen and use the end wrench to tighten this up, or if you have an Allen head socket for your ratchet, you can just go ahead and go from this side and hold the nut with the wrench. So what we'll go ahead and do now is hang the engine, and we'll get our bolts. It's nice to have one on one side along with the spacer. This is best done with 2 people. It's rather difficult to do with 1. It can be done with 1, but doing it with 2 is a far simpler way to do it. Also, you have to remember that this engine and everything that's set up back here is around 80 pounds. So, you know, be careful. You know, just there's no reason to hurt your back trying to do this. Get some help. Okay, so now my trusty sidekick Austin and I are going to lift this up, and we're going to go ahead and hang the engine. So get a nice grip. Up we go. And these just simply hang on the bar like that. It's a good moment to go ahead and take your throttle, bring it through the frame, and just lay it down to where you're not going to step on it. It's not in the way. This is the routing it will take. So as I was mentioning before, you can see the slot here and the slots in the back. And what we want to do is we're going to get one bolt, slide it through the slot. And this is kind of simple. You can push the bolt all the way through and hold it flush. We're going to need to shift this engine over to the right about 1/2 inch so that we're at the very far adjustment, moving the engine to the right. Okay, so Austin is going to slide this over to the right, and he just needs to go a little bit more, maybe 1/4 inch to the right. Go ahead and set it down, Austin. There we go. Get the bolt and see if we're good. And that right there is pretty good. So we'll go ahead and Austin will lift that motor back out, and this is on a hinge, so this is easy to do. We can slide the bolt back out, set our spacer in between, get that through, and Austin can just continue to hold it there a second, and I'll get the other one going. And go ahead and bring it in, Austin.
Held up.
Yeah, hold on.
Oh.
Okay, and let it rest. That one went through, and
It's through.
that one's through, and it's all the way over to the right now. And all we need to do is secure the bolts with the lock washer and nut. Okay, so we just go ahead and put the washer and the nut on. And then we can use our 6mm Allen. And we're going to go ahead and use one that's on a ratchet and a 13mm end wrench. And tighten both of these up. Back to you, Austin. So that completes the installation of the engine and the engine mainframe to the LowBoy III. Okay, next thing that we're going to do is we're going to locate the wiring that goes to your electric fuel pump. Austin has got that out. We're going to route it going underneath the frame over the top of the fuel tank. Go ahead and go in between your return line and to the inside of your inlet line. There's a receptacle on the fuel pump on this side. You just line it up, turn it, and plug it in. Once it's plugged in, you'll feel the connector go click. So now that we have that installed, we can take a tie wrap. You can just gently put these together to keep them in place. And you could add another one over here off the strut if you want to secure it. At this time, you can take your main fuel line. As we talked about earlier, it'll come with a standoff. Go ahead and route this up. Go to the inboard side of the strut. Come up to your throttle body and just leave the hose laying there. So we'll bring the standoff that comes already on the fuel hose up to the strut. For now, do not tighten this. Just have it here because when we put the rest of this together with the cage on here, we might need to make a little adjustment here. Big thing is do not pull this super tight. We want it to have a little bit of wiggle room, and you're going to find that your fuel line comes a little bit longer than it needs to be, so we're going to need to trim this to fit. So it's easy right now just to lay it like that, have this in place, and then we'll go ahead and move on to adding radiator fluid at this time, adding engine oil, installation of your air filter and breather hose assembly, installation of the battery. It's easier to do this stuff now without having this big cage around here where you can actually get your hands and stuff here. Once we get all that done, we're going to go ahead and move on to bleeding the fuel system at the same time, because that's a lot easier to do while we're available to move around the engine freely. Okay, so we're going to dive into getting our engine ready to run. A couple only little pieces you're going to need to add, but I wanted to take a moment and let you know that the engine has a manual that's available online on our website, and we'll show you right now on our website where that can be located. Everything that you need to know about this engine as the owner is in that manual, right down from the engine oil that comes supplied with the motor. This is for break-in only, and you would never know that until you go ahead and read the manual. And I'm going to refer you to the manual a lot. It's very important that you go ahead, download that manual. It's a PDF file. It's real easy to do, and go through it. It gives you the maintenance schedule. It gives you what your maximum temperature should be, engine temperature should be running in the winter time versus what the summertime. I'm going to highlight a note on a couple of things right off the bat. The oil that we supply you is for break-in only. That's the first 3 hours of running this engine. When you change the oil, which refer to the engine manual, it's very specific on how to change the oil. There's a filter in this engine. It's a screen filter. But once you change this oil, you're going to switch to another oil that is a fully synthetic. This is semi-synthetic. And that oil is Mobil 1 FS0W-40. And that'll be the oil that you use in it for the rest of its life. Again, refer to the manual on the maintenance schedule, how often to change it. Your running temperatures. The engine temperature is actually going to run higher in the winter versus the summer. The reason behind that is due to the plastic valve cover that's on here, the breather system that's on here. In the winter time, when you have more humidity in the air, some places are going to be a lot drier in the winter. But what they have found is that moisture will accumulate in here, ends up mixing in with the oil. So what they do is you bring the engine running temperature up so that it evaporates off any moisture that condensates within the valve cover and ends up getting in the oil. It simply just gets evaporated off. You'll end up having to block the radiator and go out and fly it until you have enough of the radiator blocked to where you're running at those temperatures. These are things that you need to know, and you're going to have to find those in the manual. So again, I want to refer you to the manual, read the manual, understand the manual. If you have questions, feel free to give me a call here at BlackHawk. I can walk you through some of this stuff. But they've done a very good job on the engine manual with this. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and start adding oil in. This engine is a dry sump lubrication system, so when we pour oil into here, there's a sight glass located on the lower right hand back portion of the motor. The actual oil reservoir is at the front of the motor, so when we're pouring the oil in, it's going down to the crankcase, but it's a dry sump crankcase. So as we fill this up with oil, oil is going to drift back and start filling up the reservoir. What I suggest is on the bottle of oil, there's a clear strip here so you can see how much you've put in. What we'll do is we're going to go ahead and add 500 milliliters first, and then we're going to just let this oil settle out. The engine's going to take approximately 800 milliliters to get it. Again, I want to refer you to the engine manual, because to check the oil level on this properly, the engine needs to be warm, and then you're going to look through the sight glass, and the minimum amount with the engine being level, which is going to require you to lift up the front of your quad a little bit. You can put a level here if you want to be real super precise about it, right on top of this shaft. Idea is it's level, the engine oil's warm, the minimum level is halfway in the sight glass, and then you can have it up to about 3/4. that amount of oil tends to be right around 800 milliliters. Again, read the manual. They'll take you through on how to do this. So we'll go ahead and add our 500 milliliters, basically half a bottle here. And we'll just let that settle so it goes into the sump. Do not overfill this engine with oil. It'll vent out the top through your air filter. It makes a huge mess. It doesn't like it. It's a dry sump oil system. That's half right now. What we'll do is just going to go ahead and let that settle for a moment. We'll go ahead and add our antifreeze coolant. What we use is just a 50-50 mix, so you're not having to add water. This coolant system does not take very much. What I found is I just like to use an empty water bottle, fill it up. If you want, you can use the bottle and a funnel, but typically you'll find yourself maybe overfilling it. So we just go ahead and add this into the radiator, and we want to bring it up just to below the filler neck. So we'll just go ahead and pour this in. There's one, and it probably won't take all of this one before it's full. Looking down in here, you'll see the level come up to just below the filler neck. And maybe just a touch more there. Perfect. Okay, what we're going to do is the radiator cap has two positions on it. So we'll put the cap on, and we're going to just rotate it to the first click. This allows air to escape, and we'll get into burping it once we start the motor. But the idea is this coolant cycles through the engine, there's going to be some trapped air. We want that trapped air to escape, and after we've run it for a minute or two, we're going to shut it off. We can go ahead and remove this without worrying about it building up any pressure, and we're going to check and make sure that we don't need to add coolant to it. So for right now, we'll just leave it at that first click. Let's go ahead and check the engine oil level now, see about where we're at. We're going to look at the sight glass. I'm going to have my sidekick Austin raise that up until we're fairly level. Go ahead a little bit more, a little bit more, a little bit more, about right there. And we're down here at about a quarter in the sight glass. So you'll go ahead and set that back down. We'll go ahead and add in 300 milliliters more, and we're going to just check it again. In the manual it says up to 900 milliliters. Keep in mind that when you change the oil in this, there might be a bit of residual. I think it's just better, so that you don't overfill it, to go ahead and just take a couple of steps like this to ensure that you have the proper oil level to begin with. So we're going to go ahead and add kind of the other 300 milliliters or so of oil, and then we'll go ahead and give this a check again. See where we're at now. That's about right. And coming back down to the sight glass, Austin's going to go ahead and lift that back up again. Just down a little bit, Austin. Okay, so when I'm checking to see if the engine's level, I'm just using the bench in the background here and just kind of lining up. This shaft is straight. Everything here is square. So it's a good reference point for it being level. And I'm just lining it up with the bench top. I know our bench top's pretty level. So anyways, that's what I'm talking about as far as making sure that the engine's level. You can see right here in the video that this motor is canted forward about 5 degrees. That's done on purpose, and that's so that when you have the prop blast going over the top of the glider, that way you're not disrupting your layout, and as you move forward it allows the glider to start and inflate, and as you move forward it can fly up and go past that prop wash a lot easier. So that's why we have this angle here. There we go, that's about right. We just added in the rest of the oil, and now the sight glass is completely full. So what's going to happen now is that oil's going to slowly go back into the oil reservoir. But we know we have about the right amount of oil in it, so we're just going to let that settle out for right now. We'll go ahead and move forward, and we're going to install the battery right now. On the back right part of the mainframe assembly here, you're going to notice a tray with a strap. This is for where your battery goes. Your LowBoy III and Aero 1000 are going to come with a lithium-ion battery. These are kind of the newest, latest, greatest thing. It's a lithium battery that will actually go ahead and take the charge safely without all the explosive things of the old LiPo batteries, and actually run on the charging system. They're a very small, lightweight battery that have the amp hour capacity to take care of everything that's going on with this engine. One note about these batteries is if it does discharge, and for example, maybe you left a switch on or something and the battery went dead, you cannot use your regular car charging battery charger to charge these. You need to have an appropriate charger for this. It's an LIFE P04 charger, so you'll have to purchase that separately. Pretty much available in a lot of places nowadays. We're going to go ahead and take our battery out, and you're going to notice that this is just a really nice, light, compact battery. Did kind of a lot of research. I settled on the anti-gravity batteries because a lot of the other LIFE batteries are an OEM replacement for motorcycles or ATVs and that type of stuff. This company's actually made some super compact stuff, which is really good for what we do. How we want to orient the battery is with the positive side going inboard. The negative side obviously would be on the outboard side. So we can set the battery in the tray and it fits in there nice. Make sure it's backed up. Now we're just going to take our strap. This is what secures the battery in place. And we'll snug this down nice and tight. We just go ahead and get that in. We can pull this up. I like to just cinch it down good. Okay, that's nice and secure. Right here's your ignition switch. The up position is off. Middle position is on. And then it's a momentary switch, spring loaded down. This is your start. Okay. We'll want to make sure at this point that this is in the off position. On your throttle handle, the very top is your kill switch. When it is in the up position, this is on. When it's in the down position, this is off. So when you push this button down, it doesn't matter what you do here, this is going to be dead. It shuts the power off to everything. We did this as a redundant feature. Sometimes a lot of people will forget after they land to turn this off, but they obviously killed their engine. Sometimes people forget to turn these off. This kind of eliminates that problem. Here's the catch, and this is where we had to try to find a good balance between maybe some redundancy and being able to turn the engine off, a little bit of safety built into it, and some convenience of not forgetting to turn off your ignition switch after you land. So this is the balance that we came up with. The thing that you have to remember is if you're in flight and you climb up and get some altitude and want to enjoy some silence and just gliding back down, want to restart your engine, you need to make sure that you don't forget to turn that back on. Then you'll be able to reach back and start the motor again. So what you guys are going to end up doing now is red goes to positive, so that once more it's to the inside, and it's also colored red. Negative to the outside, and this one is green. So we just want to make sure that we have those in the right spots. We have this off, and on the throttle handle we have that off. So in case somebody were to inadvertently do this or anything else, we're not going to turn the motor over. So just use the supplied bolts that come with the battery. So once we've run these down finger tight, it's an 8mm. So you can also use a Phillips screwdriver in here. I just find it easier to use a wrench. So we can go ahead and just tighten these up. That's nice and snug. Now, if you read the instructions in the battery, these are not meant to be cranked mega tight. Just snug them up, okay? You can do damage to the internal portion of the battery by trying to He-Man it. So we have the battery connected now. We can move over to the other side. We'll go ahead and install the air filter and breather hose assembly. Okay, so this is your air filter and crankcase breather hose assembly. We go ahead when we get these motors. We've done a lot of the assembly stuff that you're going to see in the manual. We've done that for you, so that's been done already. It is still a good opportunity to make sure that these hose clamps are tight. You should not be able to rotate the throttle body or the injector portion of the manifold at all. So just double check those. Another thing I want to point out is this screw right here is a T20/4 Torx head, and this is to adjust your engine idle speed. What we've found a lot of times when we have gotten the new engines here and we start them up, that the engine idle is too low. You want the engine idle to be between 1800 and maybe around 2000 RPM. If you have the engine idle speed lower than that, example, it will idle at 1300 RPM. But when you go to hit the throttle during the inflation and takeoff, you might find that the engine stalls. Bring that idle speed up to about 1800 to 2000 RPM. This screw going in here is tight. It locks itself. What we found is if you go counterclockwise with it, which would reduce your idle speed a little bit, and then go ahead and turn it back clockwise, you'll find it easier. Another thing I'd like to note, when you do adjust the idle speed, a little bit goes a long ways with this. So you just go in small increments. If you do a quarter turn on this and go to start it, that prop's going to be spinning. And we don't want that because this is a clutched engine. We don't want the prop spinning. That's the idea of having a clutch. So we don't want it spinning while it's at idle. So I wanted to point that out before we go ahead and install the air filter and breather hose assembly. First thing that you're going to need tool-wise is a standard screwdriver for the hose clamp. We go ahead and tape up the intake on the throttle body for obvious reasons. We don't want foreign object stuff getting in there, so you'll just want to go ahead and remove the tape. Have that out of the way. It's a good idea at that time maybe just to have a look in there, make sure that there's nothing that for some reason or another made its way in. The air filter just simply slides on. So pop it on. Now this hose, if we were to leave it right here, doesn't naturally line up with its mate on the other side. So what we do is just rotate it to where the hose lines up, simply slide the hose on. Use our standard screwdriver, go to the clamp, and simply tighten the hose clamp. You'll feel it get snug. There we go. Don't be afraid to try to twist it. Okay, that's nice and secure. So this is all good now. Now we're back to our fuel hose. We talked about the length of it and stuff, so what we're going to do now is kind of measure this up. One of the things that we like to do is this is coming up, and once we have the net and cage around here, there's a Velcro strap that this actually goes through that makes it line up pretty good. Okay, so the next step is we have to figure out how these go together and go onto there. So kind of an easy way to do this is there's going to be a lower and an upper. The lower, you should be able to just sit it on the floor like that, and you'll notice that there is a hole drilled through it, and that is for the line guide to attach to. It's going to sit exactly like this, so if you have this over on the other side, obviously not going to work because this portion goes towards the prop. So if you set it down, you're going to see that there's the LowBoy III sticker on here. This is going to go like that. This is an easy way to figure out what piece goes where. Easiest way to do this is to line that up. You can see where this slides onto that one, and then also on the outside portion here, these have to slide into each other like that. I just like to take my fingers, hold it together here, and then simply just push them down together. Now we've assembled 1/2 of the left side here. My sidekick over here, Austin, beat me to it and got his together already. To install the half section right here on the engine mount frame, there's a hole. Down on the bottom where the exhaust is at, there's a hole. Those go here. That's the upper one. The lower one, the two halves will join here in the center. So it's easy to line these up. Line them up, slide them together. Pull from the center here, and then also pull in at the bottom. Make sure that they're all the way together, and then join the top part. Your Velcros will be already in place. This is real simple to do. Start with this Velcro in the center. Come around this tube. We're at the forward portion of the quad now. Squeeze these together as tight as you can. Pull on it, pull on it. It's going to come around and then back on itself with the hook and loops for the Velcro. It's the same procedure going all the way around. There's going to be a lower strap that's only 1 inch that's going to secure the lower portion to the main frame of the engine. We'll get a close-up of that for you in a second. Right now we're just going to go ahead and finish up the outside one, and then we'll jump down here and get a close-up of the other one for you. Okay, so now that we have all the outside Velcros on, the center, we're going to come down here and get a close-up of the lower Velcro strap. So this lower Velcro strap, just undo it. You can hold the end with the buckle on it here if you want, or vice versa on the other side. This is going to come around to the inside of the engine mount frame. Go through the buckle. Tighten it. And let the hook and loop work its magic. Now we've got the bottom secure, and we're going to repeat this on the other side. that completes the cage installation, and we may as well go ahead and install our line guides. As I mentioned before a few times already, the hardware is already here. You'll have a bolt and a washer. The hole's already pre-drilled for you, so all you'll need to do is go ahead and put the bolt through the hole. Line guide installs like this with this up, so it holds the lines rather than makes them go down. So we just line that up. So just go ahead and kind of eyeball it. You can stand off to the side and make sure that it's nice and parallel with the cage. You're going to need a 5mm Allen wrench for this, and tighten it up. Make sure it's nice and secure. And that completes the installation of the line guides. You'll do exactly the same thing on the opposite side. Okay, so we're gonna get ready here to bleed the fuel system, but I want to talk about fuel for a moment. This is a subject that always comes up. If you go by Helvinco's manual, the minimum octane rating in there is 95. It also states in there that you can use avgas 100 low lead as an alternative if you can't find anything more. We've been working with Helvinco for quite a while now and using these engines, and you are going to have no problems using premium unleaded. It can have ethanol or non-ethanol, up to you. It's always nice if you can get your hands on non-ethanol fuel, and usually you can find that in a higher octane rating. But 91 octane is the absolute minimum for these. If you happen to live in an area that lets you buy actually good fuel, don't hesitate. It's not a problem to run anything between 91 octane up to 100 octane. And as a substitute, and I'm going to repeat this, as a substitute you can use avgas. Our experiences with avgas in these engines has not been that great. I would highly recommend 91 octane if you can find 95. 98, a lot of your off-road centers and stuff usually will have something available like that. The engines that we've had here through the shop that we've run, our personal stuff, we run premium unleaded in them, and we've never had any issues with it. So anyways, that's the note on fuel. The stock option on this is the plastic fuel tank, and it'll look like this. It's going to come set up on a bracket, and it's going to be sitting in basically the same place, and the fuel pump sits in pretty much the same place. Difference is just a 3.2 gallon tank. There's a sticker on these fuel tanks that we put, and it says flush fuel tank before using. I can't overemphasize this. Flush out the fuel tank. Just get a little bit of fresh fuel in them, swish it around, dump it out into an environmentally safe container. Reuse it in your lawnmower, whatever you want to do, but do not put it back in the fuel tank. Want to flush it out just in case there's anything left in here from manufacturing or even us at the shop. We do make mistakes once in a while. So make sure that the fuel tank is clear and clean. That goes for the aluminum tank too. We've already taken care of this tank. So just wanted to note that. As we're getting ready to bleed the fuel system, and we have the seat here removed. We know that we'd already put it in and stuff, but for the video purposes and visibility purposes, we went ahead and removed the seat. So what we're going to do is Austin's going to go ahead and put a couple of gallons of gas in this. As we're putting fuel in the tank, maybe put half a gallon in it, stop, and just check the bottom fittings. If you have the plastic tank, check the outlet hose going into the fuel pump and stuff, and ensure that you don't have any leaks. You'll start to notice that your inlet line fills up, and then you're going to see your return line filling up. This is all a really neat sign because it shows that we have gas going in, everything's flowing freely. So once you have fuel in it, go ahead and put the fuel cap back on. The fuel cap on the aluminum tank and the plastic tank are vented. Then go ahead and put your fuel jug in some nice place where it's going to be out of your way. And we'll go ahead and get started on bleeding the fuel system. For this, you're going to need something to put underneath the fuel pump. So Austin will grab us a little tray so that we can make sure that we get basically air out of the pump before we turn it on. This is very important. These fuel pumps are not designed to actually draw fuel per se. In other words, they're not sucking fuel. They've got to be gravity fed, and that's why your inlet needs to be even with the outlet of the fuel tank. That's why they're mounted right here. The idea is that the fuel gravity feeds into here. It's going to get pumped, built up to 43 psi of pressure up to your throttle body. But if we try to turn this pump on and we have air in here, we can damage the pump immediately, and we don't want to do that. First thing we're going to do, the return line right here, we're going to go ahead and disconnect it. When we disconnect this, if you watch closely, you're going to see some air bubbles come out and then a solid stream of fuel. As soon as you see that solid stream of fuel, we're going to go ahead and reconnect this. Austin, take it away. Air. And so you guys get my drift. You saw the air coming out, stuff. So we want to make sure that, and this is where the fuel's coming in through the pump. This is your pressure relief going back to here and into the fuel tank. And now we're pretty good. The next step is we can move our receptacle and we'll disconnect the main fuel line. Hey, we got fuel. Notice how it's just drip, drip, drip. Let the air get out of there. Go until we have a nice solid stream. I think I made my point there. That's a nice solid stream. So now we can hook up the outlet line. So the fuel line, the fuel pump's been bled. We've reattached our fuel line, and we're going to go ahead and move up top, because our next step is going to be up here. We're going to trim the fuel line to length, and then we're going to go ahead and turn on the pump and get rid of the air that is in this line before we attach it to the throttle body. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do, now that we've bled the fuel pump, is earlier on when we put this fuel line in during the pump installation, we had put a standoff on there. So this is all pretty much ready to go. We left it loose in case we need to do any adjusting. Your fuel line is going to get routed, and you can notice where the two quarters come together. It just goes in between the quarters like that. Your fuel line is going to come with the clamp already on the hose, so you shouldn't have to look for it. You're going to go ahead and bring it through. And what we want to do is find a nice length that comes comfortably to the throttle body, and we want to make it long enough to encompass the entire nipple for the injector. And this is nice. That works really, really well. So we'll go ahead and cut the hose right there. Okay, so we went ahead and trimmed our fuel line to length. I've got the clamp already just sitting on the hose because we're going to want to be kind of quick about this. We're going to go ahead and bleed the fuel system. This is easiest done if you have a friend here that can help you with just turning that switch that I showed you earlier to only the on position. That turns on the fuel pump. That fuel pump has about a 5-second cycle on it. So we do not want to run the fuel pump longer than that, because it'll automatically turn off and then fuel can work its way back through, thus leaving air in it. Our object is to get all the air out. We can't be perfect at the top when we put this on, but as much of it out of the system as possible so that we get a quicker first start. So I've got my sidekick Austin over here. I've got my fuel receptacle, First thing I'm going to do is we had the kill switch in the off position. I'm going to go ahead and turn that to the on position. I'm going to put the hose and aim it into, you can use a water bottle, whatever works for you. And we're just going to go ahead and cycle the pump. Go ahead and turn on the pump, Austin. And we have fuel flow, turn it off. I'm going to put my thumb over this. The reason I'm putting my thumb over this is to prevent the fuel from working its way back down through the system, okay? So we have to let that cycle, the ECU, if we just were to turn it on, off again, that fuel pump's not going to turn immediately back on. Wait a good 10 seconds and then we'll go ahead and cycle it again. Go ahead, Austin. Off. Okay, I had a few little air bubbles still spurting out there. I'm keeping my thumb over this and basically letting the fuel build a little bit of pressure and spray into here, because that gives me a good indication of being able to hear and feel the air bubbles coming out. And then when I tell him to turn it off, I'm putting my thumb right back over it. So we still had a little bit of air there, Austin. Let's go ahead and turn it on again. Off. Okay, that was really clean. So we're good. This is where things get interesting. Being quick about this. I like to get my thumb right here, off, and immediately on to the nipple. Slide it all the way on. Okay, so we'll just go ahead and tighten the clamp up. Okay, that's nice and snug. So that completes the entire fuel system bleed. We'll go ahead and we can tighten up the standoff now. That's all nice. We don't want to squeeze this so tight that it obviously closes the fuel line. We can snip the end of the tie wrap off. So that part's complete. So let's check that oil level again and make sure that we're in the right spot. I know how much we've put in and stuff, but I just like looking at things a few times to just make sure. So Austin's going to go ahead and bring this up to where we're about level again. That looks really good. And hey, we are at about 2/3, which is perfect. That's where we need to be. At this moment, Austin's going to set it back down. The engine's ready to start. Here's a neat thing about the 4-stroke and having a clutch on it, and it's also a safe thing to do, is we can go ahead and start this engine now, do its initial firing, burp the radiator, check and make sure, as I discussed earlier, making sure that we've worked the air out of the cooling system, and check our idle speed, all without worrying about a propeller. You know, word of caution, when we do this, we're not going to rev this engine up. We just want to start it, and we can bring the RPM up enough to turn this, and no more than that. So at this time, that's what we're going to go ahead and do. So we'll go ahead and first remove our prop plate and the bolts. As I mentioned before, this is going to come with all the hardware in position, and it just needs to go back to where it came from. But we'll go ahead and remove these right now prior to starting the motor. And then we're going to go through the whole start sequence for you on this. And it's important, very important, that you follow this sequence. Okay, so we're ready to start this for the first time. This is always a cool thing. So prior to starting this, there's a couple things that we need to go through. First is when we turn the ignition switch to the on position, you're going to hear the fuel pump run. Let the fuel pump run. When you hear the fuel pump turn off, that's the time that we can go ahead and start. You're going to need to do that anytime that you start this engine. It needs to build up and hold that 43 psi. Next thing is, if this engine does not start in the first 5 seconds, abort the start. You'll hear the fuel pump cycle again, and then go ahead and try it again. You're just going to need to repeat this. The reason for that is due to how the ECU is programmed. The ECU actually has a start program and the run program. So start, basically it's giving it a little bit extra fuel for a short period of time. Along with that, it's retarding the ignition timing so that the engine starts easier. After 5 seconds, what happens is we go to a different fuel. I don't know, in the mapping of it, the fuel changes, and then the ignition timing advances. What can happen, and has happened, if you continue to start it and start it and start it, and it just doesn't want to start, when that ignition timing goes advanced, it can kick back and it's going to rip the teeth off that starter gear. This is EFI. We're not having to give it gas and pump it or anything else. You're not doing anything doing that. Everything is built into the ECU for the start. So without further ado, I think we're ready. So I'm going to go ahead, put that to the on position. Austin's going to go ahead and turn that on. Fuel pump is cycled and off, and we'll go ahead and go for the start. RPM is right at 1740. We could actually bring that up a hair. Just going to give it a little bit of throttle. So we've ran the engine for a couple of minutes. We'll go ahead and turn it off. Make sure that you turn off the main ignition switch. Line guides make a great place to hang your throttle where it's out of the way, by the way. So next thing we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and go around, and we always want to check the engine oil level while it's warm. Okay, so we're going to come back here, make sure our engine's level. We're checking this, and hey, perfect. We're just over half and under 3/4 right in there. We're perfect. So our engine oil level is actually really, it's good. We're cherry there. Next thing we're going to do is we can go ahead and remove the radiator cap and check our coolant level. It didn't change. So this is excellent. We're good. So you can put the radiator cap back on, push, one click, and then go ahead and turn it all the way till it's tight. So our fluids are good. Be careful, you just ran the engine for a couple of minutes, okay? And you'll notice that I didn't rev it up and all that. Don't do that. Just bring it up enough to where things are turning. That's all you need to do at this point. Run it for that couple of minutes. It's warmed up. Check the engine oil level. Check the coolant level. Next thing that we are going to move on to is adjusting that idle. That idle speed was just a little bit low. So we're going to get our Torx head, and we're just going to turn this. And remember, I explained earlier, it's easier to turn this a little counterclockwise, come back, and we're just going to bring it up a little bit. I only turned that maybe 1/8 of a turn, okay? We're going to go ahead and restart the engine. Remember, it's fuel injected. Don't give it any gas. We're just going to restart it, check our idle speed. What we're looking for is 1,800 RPM to about 2,000. Anywhere in there is fine. So we'll come back over here. I'm going to turn it on. Austin, fuel pump cycle. Wait for it to stop, and we can go for the start. Perfect. Like I said earlier, you only have to give it a little bit of a turn that goes a long ways. So our idle speed falls right within the range. We can turn it off. Now we can install our propeller. Okay, so your Aero 1000 is going to come with a 3-blade carbon fiber prop. Okay, it's in 3 pieces. Like to call it a puzzle prop. As with anything that flies, we're going to have a leading edge and a trailing edge. The rotation of this engine, as looking at it in the direction of flight, is clockwise to the right. So the easiest way to figure this out is leading edge is going to go to the right. So you can just lay that on the floor. You can take the next one, Hold it up, leading edge going to the right. Lay it down. These will fit together like this. You can take the last blade, once more, leading edge to the right. So we can bring that down, and this you might have to do a little bit of wiggly jiggly magic. So get that together. Now our prop is together. Okay, next thing is we're going to take our prop plate. You're going to notice that the prop plate is very flat on one side and beveled. The other side has recesses for the bolts to go into. This goes facing like that. Flat portion against the propeller, bolts going through. So just line these up and go ahead and push the bolt through. There's 6 of them, so just work your way around. These bolts also have a serrated lock washer on them. Make sure that they're on. Again, just work your way around it. So we fit it through. Now we can just lift up the propeller, hold it all together. Prop plate's obviously going to be aft. So just line it up, and you can line up the bolt holes on the hub. And this is going to require a little bit of wiggling. So just wiggle that on there. Don't get crazy with it. Just small movements. It'll come up against the hub. The bolts are lined up. You're going to need a 6mm Allen for this. Now we'll just go ahead and run all the bolts in. Do not tighten them very much. Go to the opposite side. Start here, go to here. Footnote: a lot of people are really into the power tool thing and hooking this on. This is not the place for it. Do it by hand. The torque on these is only 70 inch-pounds. It's not much at all. We went ahead and installed all the bolts and snugged them down. The next thing we're going to do is go through torquing the propeller bolts. This is going to be in inch-pounds. Okay, I want to repeat, inch-pounds, not foot-pounds, inch-pounds. Everything that we do with these predominantly is going to be less than 200 inch-pounds. There's various torque wrenches available. Buy something that's semi-decent. You don't need to go buy Snap-on, but don't buy Harbor Freight, for example. This one is made by Gear Wrench. You can get it on Amazon. They're about $80 or $90. I really do prefer, on the lighter torque stuff, to use a 1/4 inch drive torque wrench. That means that this is 1/4 inch. They have inch-pound torque wrenches that are 3/8 drive, and it goes up from there. Light things, I just prefer this. In the end, the result needs to be the same, 70 inch-pounds. So how we'll start this is, I'll just start right here, and we're just going to go in an alternating pattern. This is a click type torque wrench. So I can go, wow, I'm turning that quite a ways and not a lot of resistance. So I'm not going to take it to the full value yet. I'm just going to go through, and you'll feel when these are starting to get up there. That's doing pretty good. So I'm just going to change my pattern a little bit. Now I'll go for the value. Click. Stop right there. It's not click, 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 click. One click. Go to the opposite side. Click. I'm going to jump over. Across. Okay, you might think we're done yet. No, we're not. We're going to go ahead and go through the pattern again. Start in a different position. Hey, it moved. That stayed. 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 That one moved. And that one moved. Okay, so we had a few that moved. We're going to do it again. Good. Good. That one moved. Good. Good. So we had one that moved. Guess what? Going to do it again. Idea is this is a pressure plate. We want the pressure to be equal all the way throughout. If any one of these moves, you keep going in the patterns until they stop moving. We're good there. Good there. Good there. Good there. Good there. Good. This is now torqued. So after we make our first run, for example, we take this outside, we go ahead and run it for 5 minutes. Do another complete check of your engine. You're looking for leaks. Look for a mistake you might have made where you left something loose or something's out of place. Fix those problems now. Check the engine oil level again. And then you're going to go back and you're going to check the torque of the prop again. You're going to find that they move. This is a 3-piece prop. Things are going to settle in. Okay? Torque it up again. You're going to go out and make that first flight. When you land, guess what? You're going to check it again. You're going to continue to check it until they stop moving entirely. And then you're going to periodically check them. This is important. Okay, so the final piece of the puzzle is the arms. These arms are used strictly just to locate your CG. They're not load bearing. Once more, they come with the hardware installed. We've already installed one here so you can see what it looks like. And we'll just go through putting this one on. So we have the hardware. The arm fits in right here. So we want to line up this hole with this hole. So just go ahead and slide this in. There we go. That's looking pretty lined up. Go ahead and take the bolt. It goes in from the top down. Just like that. And then we use the washer and the lock nut on the bottom. Once more, a 6mm Allen and a 13mm. And just snug it up. There's no reason to try and break the bolt in half tightening it. So that's the installation. Next, our load strap that we attached in the very beginning, assembling the main frame portion of the LowBoy III. It's on here. The small loop that's on the top is where your carabiner strap goes through. This is the locator. So notice how the strap comes up and it has a natural look to it. One side goes through here, the other side goes through here. Now we're going to go ahead and install our carabiner. Remember, when we put carabiners on, we like the locking portion. So we want the gate facing up and inboard. Easiest way to do that is start with it here, just like that. It's open. We come from the inside, capture both loops, rotate it around. Now they're in the proper position. And that completes the installation. Okay, that completes the entire assembly. Running your motor, all the checks that you need to do. Now it's time for you guys to go out, hook up with your instructor, enjoy yourself, fly safe. I can't overemphasize one point. if you have an instructor, you should be doing this assembly with him. You should be training with an instructor and do it right. Be safe, okay? Thanks a lot. Take care.